Thank you.
All right. Yes, well, now that we're live, we can, kind of take a step back, take a deep breath, since it's been a long day with a lot of content. Um, Welcome to our panel discussion for today. We've got some really, really phenomenal ladies on today's panel, as well as some really exciting topics around cultural inclusivity in tech, the impact of diversity and what it means for innovation, as well as AI ethics. So got some very, very strong AI leaders on this call. So excited to get to that one towards the end. So again, we'll give everyone a couple of minutes to join and get settled. Also want to make it very clear to everyone in the chat, this is really your time. So if there's any questions that you want to ask our panel of experts today, please feel free to jump in. With that, I think we can go ahead and get started with introductions. So I'm Christine Lovas. I am our panel moderator this afternoon. So I am with ValueBlue. Obviously, I see the EA market through, that sales lens. So I do a lot of conversations out in the field. Happy to share, my insight from kind of that external party. Daphne, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself next?
Sure. Thank you, Christine. So I'm Daphne Guillory. I am the Director of AI and Data Science at a Fortune 100 healthcare company. I'm also the Chief Architect at Optimum EA. So my focus is on building responsible, human-centered AI through enterprise architecture. I really believe that architecture isn't just about technology. It's about designing systems that reflect our shared values. So when it comes to diversity, from my perspective, it is a design principle. It shouldn't be an afterthought because we build organizations and algorithms. When we include it, shift left, they will earn trust and create lasting impact. So thrilled to be here. I'll turn it back to you, Christine. Thank you.
Of course, and thank you. Alessandra, would you like to go next with your introduction?
Yes, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alessandra. I'm currently a director enterprise architect at Salesforce, but also working as a researcher for a local university here in Brazil, focus much more on the impact of AI in process and people inside like big companies and how we can transform with sustainability in regenerative architectures. I've been involved also in some discussions on AI ops and AI architecture and how the things are evolving and how we should be really caring about all these transformations in AI era. It's a pleasure to be here with all.
Of course, and thanks for the introduction. And last but not least, Geeta, feel free to make your name known if people don't already know.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and apologies for being late. I was having some difficulty. So, Geeta Pyne, I'm the Senior Managing Director and Chief Architect for a company called TIAA, which is Teachers Insurance and Annuity Association. We are a 100+ years old company, and we our mission is really have equality in like having enough to retire. So I have been with the company for a little over 2 years, but I have been doing this role for ever and ever and ever. I think I feel like, and talking about AI and human centric, right? One of our key focuses, and especially 100+ years old company, is tremendous opportunity to really transform with not just general technology, but with AI and agentic AI. So one of my key role is how to reimagine, rethink retirement, asset management, wealth management in the age of AI, not just take what you're doing today and just sprinkle AI, but really reimagine. And a huge part of this is workforce transformation. I think Daphne, you mentioned about technology versus like the human and the business aspect. So people process technology. A huge part of my work is also around how do you think about workforce transformation to really take advantage. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Of course, and thank you all for joining us. So I definitely want to make sure that we cover all of our topics today, especially AI. I know everyone has a strong opinion about that. But before we kind of get to that level, I want to talk about cultural inclusivity in tech decision making. So I'm curious, and this is just an open question for the group. What strategies have you seen work well to ensure that there's culturally diverse voices as you're making technology decisions, whether that's AI or something else? Anyone want to kick us off?
Yeah, I can jump in there. So there are kind of three patterns that I use to really scale cultural inclusivity. So the first one is that we design the governance, right? When we set up our architectural councils, our steering committees, I always push for inclusion based on actual impact, not just the org chart. Because if a region or group, if they're heavily impacted by the decisions we make, they should have an equitable seat, an equitable vote. So we would encode that into our RACIs for key decisions, for data retention, for example, for our model rollouts to particular countries. Another pattern that I love to employ is that we're using structured participatory design, right? So it's not just an open mic inclusion where the loudest voice gets heard. We need to, again, have human-centered AI, like storyboarding, like having co-design workshop sessions, having prototype walkthroughs. Because what I find is that people who are kind of marginally dismissed, they will not speak up in a big room. So we have to put forth effort to make sure that their voices are included so that the design reflects that, so that we're delivering AI that really works for everyone. So I talk about differential friction, for example. We know that's like the universal open door phenomenon, right? So you can take an office building, they have one main entrance, beautiful glass door, and they, the company proudly says, our building is accessible to everyone, right? Everyone is welcome. The door is unlocked every day. But if you look a little bit closer, what you'll see is that an able-bodied person, they can walk up to the door, pull it open, right in, right? No problem. Look a little bit more, you see a person in a wheelchair, it's not that easy for them. Or say a person with a toddler in their laptop bag. To get into that same door, it's a struggle. They might have to put something down to navigate it. Look at someone who's a little bit smaller or an elderly person. Again, they got to put weight on that door to try and get into it. So in theory, it really is a universal door, right? But in actuality, the level of friction, right? The effort, the stress, the hassle, it's very different depending on who you are. That nominal process, the way that we think about that, it shows up in our designs in tech and AI. So if you translate that open door to a digital system, we might say, let's say, a really simple identity check. It assumes that everyone has a stable address, a smartphone, a government ID. For new immigrants, that's not the case. For people with unstable housing, that's not the case. For survivors of domestic violence, that is not the case. So there's so many examples of this. Our support bots, it automatically assumes everyone is fluent in written English, right? And that we all communicate in the typical way. For someone with autism or ADHD or someone with anxiety trauma, it's not the same thing. They might need a little bit more time to process and respond. Are the constant, are you there? Are you there? Right? That might set off an anxiety spike. So in those things, it's the differential friction that we have to include in our design. And then real briefly, the third one is we have to require evidence of inclusion in our design artifacts. So our ADRs, our architectural design records, our design docs, they have to explicitly state who was consulted, what's their geography, what's the user segment, what change resulted as a part of their inclusion. And if we see no change, that's a clear indication we're probably engaged in inclusion theater and we might want to revisit that. So that's the three patterns that I kind of rely on very heavily to make sure that cultural inclusivity is included. It's baked into our tech decision making.
Yeah, love that. Love the phrase inclusivity theater because there really is so much of that too. I know in a lot of my sales engagements, something that comes up is like, how can you read an architecture diagram if you're visually impaired?
Yes.
How can you do that? And that it's an extremely valid question. Alessandra or Geeta, I'm curious to get your thoughts as well.
I would like to include because in some of companies that I have been working together, this diversity topic is addressed by as a nice to have.
Yes.
And in my opinion, it's something it's requirement. It's an architecture and a structure requirement. When it's a simple example, like when we are designing system that will operate, for example, across regions. Even here in Brazil is a giant country. You have like 5 different regions that are completely different. But let's think about world globally things. We are going to operate across regions, language, regulatory context, and with different behavioral patterns, monocultural logic becomes an structural risk, because that you are planning and developing just with a single point of view, and it's not a topic like one size fits all. We need to be like really diverse voices changes just not what we build but how we frame problems at the first place. I've been like engaging with people from different backgrounds with that I have, and it brings such more creativity and speed up some go-to-market strategies because they are looking in a different point of view. So
Mhm.
cultural diversity, it thinks about like many other aspects, not like how like we are considering people from different universities. We are considering people from different like regions of your country, like different regions of the world. So think about like how diversity can fit into like the way that you want to go to market and position your product and your solutions. So in practice, that means intentionality and creating spaces where different perspectives are not only invited like by structurally embedded decision cycles. We are like it means that we need to validate assumptions with people who lives in different markets, understand different user behaviors, and bring like realities outside that we cannot see. And it's
Mhm.
because we cannot see that it does not exist, and we need to expand. In my point of view, that also means diversity, and means recognizing that technology only achieves global scale when the architecture honors the culture of nuances in the world. We are not just like figuring out like things from that works in your regions and your reality and your background. So diversity is not just a moral gesture. Is a source of precision, creativity, and adaptability. So when we are culturally diverse, we can shape technology and we can evolve with more structure and positive impact that will bring more resiliency, relevant, and more human um, impact and relevance by the end of the day.
Absolutely. And that is such a good point about understanding the global scale. So my, career background is in working with scale-ups and startups that want to expand into the US market. And exactly to your point, people view the US as a monolith. And every region has a different way of approaching, a way of speaking, cultural norms, and that even extends into Canada too. Like there's so much
Definitely.
of this like view that the culture is a monolith between the two, and it's a fourth of the world if we're talking about geographically speaking. There's no way that that's just really relevant at all. I want to move
Yes.
us to kind of a follow-up question. So how can enterprise architects help break down those barriers that may inadvertently exclude the non-dominant cultures from AI or tech solution design? It's a tough one.
I'll take a stab at it. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Or did someone else want to speak to it?
Yeah, no. Like excluding like AI, it's like risk. Like it's hard to talk about AI when everything is dominated by AI. I was talking with
Exactly.
a couple of friends like 2 days ago, and for example, we don't know what text is produced by AI or by a human anymore. And if it's produced by created by an AI, it's a combination with many other things that might bring a lot of biases and like things that will not necessarily is like the right thing or the wrong thing or the point of view. We are assuming like context and relevance of like many things like created by an AI, that's not necessarily like what we expect to be, or it's not necessarily your opinion. So the way that we are treating data today must be reviewed. We need to think about like how we are redefine like inclusion. Diversity precedes like inclusion and equity. We need to be more inclusive and have more equity when we are. So when we are excluding, we are designing uh, data sets that reflects all only dominant populations, when governance boards lack diversity and representations, or when we are assuming that it's everything made based on a single market's behavior. The result of all that is like technology that works perfectly for a few and support poorly for everyone else. So that means technology, we think about technology to create like proximity, we are putting everybody together, or we are creating a even bigger gap. So it is completely the opposite of diversity. And I think that
Mhm.
instead of just think on AI, we need to think about like the product that we will like help us to produce good AI. That's all the data. And unfortunately, we are going through a process where we are not caring about data.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the bias in data. So for anyone who didn't catch my longer intro earlier in my prior session, my background is in geography and GIS, and that's something, the data bias reduction is so critical to, designing a city or designing where a road goes. So Geeta, I'm really interested to get, your take as you're thinking about AI products for, retirement and the equity there. So yeah,
Yeah,
feel free to chime in.
absolutely. I just want to, like you talked about the role of enterprise architect. I feel like the enterprise architect and chief architect, we have a fiduciary responsibility, number one, to bring everybody along for the ride, right? And I
Mhm.
think we get to see the forest from the trees. I mean, not that we are, superwoman or super man, depending on who you are, right? But I think one of the critical role we serve, besides like knowing the technology and the pieces, is really like bringing everybody's perspective, like back in the days before even AI and all this, right? We used to tell if there is an elephant in the room, everybody looks at their pieces, and like whether am I looking at the trunk or looking at the tail or looking at the right. And if an architect entered the room who can see actually the whole elephant, right? So to me, that holistic thinking from everybody's perspective, without that you cannot be an enterprise architect. And I think what I see now, and I'm sure you all see it, the role of this architect is becoming more and more important. Many a time just bringing these pieces together, I think you just granted that you got to know your craft, right? From a technology, being able to go all the floors of the elevator, that's given. But then
Mhm.
how do you bring that mindset? And architecture is a mindset. How do you inspire people? How do you motivate people to look from these different angles? I think that's the critical role we play, because you can always find a lot of subject matter experts. And Alison, I mean, you talked about, you don't even know what is AI generated versus human generated, right? So a lot of stuff you can use the system or the agents to create. But what we still do not see is that angle of the critical thinking, the curiosity, the collaboration, that you still need the human. And I think our job is going to be still secured for that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, asking the right question, you talked about framing the right problem. How do you make sure, is this the right problem to solve? And are we solving in the right way? I think it's still the job of us, right? So to me, if I talk now, bring home to retirement, right? We are leveraging AI, just like every company, even as simple as like customer call center, right? So there is
Mhm.
huge opportunity. So one part is that yes, you can, but then do we have things like empathy? So you may have heard our CEO or CTO talk about empathy agent. So we have interjected. Yes, you can get a lot of data wrangling, getting the information, even the right answer, but is the right tone injected? If you are talking to an aging population who is relying on that last, maybe the check to pay their day to day, and do you have the right tone when you are saying and escalating an issue, right? So to us, that's the kind of, so you, I think Daphne, you mentioned about responsible AI policy or bringing everybody together in that. That's what we are doing as an EA or the chief architect, to make the right representation with their legal risk compliance to technologies, all bringing together, including the ethics. And then how do we make it embedded as a part of the policy, so that even though not everybody may be having the same level of, kind of expertise, can you actually codify the heck out of it so that it becomes a part of the DNA and the fabric? So that's what I look forward to every day. How do you create, and this morning also, like, just how do we make this decisioning away and our responsibility to make it the paved road, make it the highways, and I'm talking about software highway, software runway, so that people can, the traffic, the right traffic in the right lane can be driven.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, extremely, extremely well said. I think, but my next thought is, and I'm, deviating maybe from our proposed outline earlier, but as we're thinking about, kind of being the stewards for diversity and leading these charges internally, like, have there been times that you've received pushback, and how have you kind of faced this with the larger organization? Anyone want to take a stab at that one, or I can pontificate?
Let me try like to frame these like at any time that you try to expand like the decision making circle, you will face like a pushback. Diversity challenges power like distribution habits, comfort zones, and architecture is deeply political at some points. Like when you are changing who is invited into the room, and you change the out, you are able to change the outcomes. And it's not everyone that are ready or welcome to shift that. Just like one thing back like to the topic that we are talking before, but it's connected directly with your question, is architectures are must be the treat inclusion as a structural safeguard. That means that we are intentionally bringing non-dominant voices or topics that will be set it up as process and technology that will help to validate how people will be experiencing the benefits of the technology at the end of the day. So uh, I have a couple of examples of like when it sometimes like when it happens, but one common phrase that sometimes I hear is like, we don't need this level of diversity. We already have this like in our data, or we already have the considering that, like reflecting in a past situation. That it's we should talk about diversity and how we are uh, pushing this nowadays as a frame of efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
When we challenge with this, I like to bring this as examples of where assumptions might fail. And for instance, in a global rollout, as a simple workflow decision, ignoring local compliance rules. For example, we apply the same thing from US in Mexico and Brazil. It's not going to work. And we had to redesign an entire process after spending like days, weeks in a project, and sometimes money that will be impacted. So treat local voices, understand the local things. It's part of the risk management. It's not like being super protected or overseeing like what needs to be seen. So people need to understand like it's not a matter of slowing down a process. It's taking the response and avoid risks and frictions to prevent failures for later. And every time that I push to include pause a project, to include regional or underrepresented perspectives, or reveal data based, like not just like to look back what we have done, but what we need to look into the data and how the things will be working. to avoid misalignments or biases, outputs, or things that might happen because we are taking just like a single perspective, or we are not like considering that like a huge spectrum. So
Yeah.
those are some like examples that I have.
Yeah.
I,
I
I
oh, go
I
ahead.
just want to add one thing here, like you mentioned about resistance. So I always tell that if nobody is actually, if you don't have anybody that is actually questioning, you're probably not working on anything hard.
Yeah,
If you are,
Yeah.
like,
Well
if
said.
you are actually doing something, there will be like, you will be misunderstood. People will ask questions. So it's not a bad thing. I get more motivation when there are, and which happens all the time, as you can see. So just don't be afraid to audiences, right? I mean, if people are challenging you, you know that you have something good going. Actually, double down on it, get all your facts together, and never give up.
Yeah.
absolutely. And if I could just add one thing, I love what you said so much. At the end of the day, we are EA practitioners. The same as legal practitioners, medical practitioners, we have an obligation to do no harm. So if you know that something will result in harm, it is your moral, ethical, legal obligation to stand up and speak on it.
Yeah.
100%.
And sometimes that requires courage, because
Oh
a lot of
Yes,
times I face some like thing like, oh, you really are going to say that? It's like going to impact like the priorities, like from the project. It's like going to be like a risk. Let's say like it's a big risk if you don't say anything. I prefer to take the risk to say something, and people will be like, I need to argue because I really understand the point, my point of view. I have like data points, I have like experience on that, and so I prefer to speed up, like point myself and prevent the risk, like the project to failure later, because I did not have like courage, or I do not challenge the status quo of this project because I was afraid that I was not, because people like are caring much more about like the quarter result than like the overall, like the long-term impact that we need to have. So be an enterprise architect nowadays, in a special life AI era, requires from us like courage.
Yeah, extremely well said. I've been writing down some quotes from you all around like, architecture is political. It's our responsibility to, have this fiduciary role, do no harm. Um, if someone's not challenging you, you're not solving a hard problem. So these will all be sound bites on LinkedIn, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, kind of switching to, we've talked about the, theme of resistance and having courage. Let's talk about a time where having a diverse team had a tangible difference in driving innovation and in your enterprise architecture projects. So if anyone has a positive story to share, would love to hear some of that.
Well, I can jump into that. Like I have tons of stories. I like to tell stories actually, but I was leading in this transition for like traditional architectures to more like future proof architectures with the AI redesigning process. I was working with a large consumer ecosystem that operate not just in Brazil but across Mexico, Colombia, and Argentina. And if Brazil is already like diverse into like the multicultural things, like when you go across Latam, it's requires like much more vision of like how the things will be working. And this mandate was not to modernize their decision engine on the architecture, but move toward more AI driven real time personalizations layer. And when we talk about personalizations layer, we have different data background, we have like different structures, and sometimes in this project like a different process. So initially the core designing team was highly technical and mostly based in one country, that was Brazil. And the first prototypes of like in discussions we're considering like overall what it happens in Brazil as like a standard process. And of course, like even if we say like we cannot hold out that and assume systems as linear purchase journeys and stable credit patterns and homogeneous digital behaviors in special across countries, they say like, but they can quickly adapt to that. They assume that you can do like an standard and they quickly. So at the first like holdout we did in Colombia, and a lot of like people like start to flag what we flagged before, that this model is ignoring some like rule-based cash microtransactions that's common in our market. So you cannot roll out that. We need to adapt. So we end up by the end with extending the project like in more than 6 months, because you need to micro adapt a lot of things from architecture, because we took the initial like as a standard without considering like some like discovery for local requirements as we sign it before, say hey we need to do that. So it's something that say the no diversity delayed the project, and we keep working with them for like other in other situations. And one of the guys said, okay, we are not going to do the same error that we did in the past. Let's get all the teams involved. And in special, perhaps it's not because our core team is based in Brazil that we need to start the analysis based just on our point of view. We perhaps need to bring like more like the other teams involved. So with that, I was able. I still work with this customer, but they now have like much more engaged teams and more performance into the way that they are using the technology, because they tackle exactly like the diversity to accelerate innovation, because it's not like just considering one point of view or one structure as the default for everything. And by the end, we eliminate gaps and problems like spaces that came from like non-diverse teams and decisions.
I love that. And Christine, if there's time, can I share one positive experience?
We've
Okay.
got 15 minutes, so yes, please share
Okay.
away.
Okay. This is hypothetical, of course. Okay.
Obviously, yes.
Yes,
It was
of
a dream
course.
you had once.
Yes. So let's suppose a global healthcare organization was rolling out an AI driven customer support assistant, right? So we initially assumed in our design there's going to be Western naming conventions, there's going to be a single legal identity, and it's going to be always online kind of access, right? 24/7. But because we baked in inclusion and diversity, we had people representing Latin America, representing Africa. What they brought to that design was the fact that people share devices, people have multi name surnames, and people have intermittent connectivity. So their contributions really advanced our design so much. We were able to significantly change the identity model. We made the assistant work offline first for certain parts of the design, and we adapted our language and tone. So their inclusion negated what might have otherwise been a major adoption failure, right? And really an issue of fairness, a critical issue of fairness. So that's just one positive example. When you bring different people to the table, the product is so much infinitely better than when it's just maybe a Western ideology that goes into the design.
Yeah, absolutely. And having these different perspectives, I think we can, as technologists, can sometimes look at a product and see like where it was developed and where those biases existed. I mean, exactly to your point, like some people have multiple surnames, like that's a thing. I know even for myself, and this is so minor comparatively, Christine has 9 letters, and the amount of websites that cut off at 8, it's crazy. And that's, not an accessibility thing. It's just an annoyance that I'm not Kristen, I'm Christine. So it does kind of shape the interaction that somebody has with your brand and their feelings and emotions towards it. So even outside of technology, there's a larger implication in organizations. So I also want to note, chat, we don't have any questions. So if there's anything you're dying to ask these ladies today, please feel free to pop that in there. I'll make sure that I get those answered for you. So I think with our last about 10 minutes or so, I want to kind of switch into the AI ethics of it all. So we've kind of touched on this topic, but I know we have 3 experts in the panel with us today. So I think first and foremost, let's talk about how to balance the imperative for innovation and AI against some of those ethical risks that we know exist. So, anyone want to take this? Daphne, you look like you want to go for it.
Yeah, I'll say one of the things that we have to change our way of thinking, right? So we don't want to hamper productivity. What we want to have fast lanes with guardrails, not speed bumps. Fast lanes, but with guardrails, right? So we want to adopt a risk-based approach. We want to include, for example, NIST, right, the RMF. We want to have those things baked in. We want to have low-risk features, right? We want to get streamlined reviews. We want high-risk ones to have deep dives. So we look at it, we balance it by the risk, right? If it's a high risk, it's worth it to invest more time, even if you have to sacrifice the delivery on it. The principles, the policies, the tooling, that's also important. There's so many things I could say, but I want to keep it brief so our other panelists will have an opportunity to jump in. The other thing is we want to bake in ethics as a design constraint. We don't want to wait until the end and then have to go back and do a post hoc assessment. We want to shift left on ethics and bake it in from the beginning. So I will pause for my other panelists to share their insight.
Yeah, so I'll tag on, Daphne, how you started. So what we have created here, what I call an AI opportunity index on the entire capability map. So as a company, what we do is describe through capabilities, whether business or technical capabilities. And within that, to guide the organization as a compass, a navigator is, I can tell everybody, what to do, but I can give some guidance around. So what we have created is, agentic AI opportunity index and AI opportunity index, which creates basically a cluster of a 2x2 of, it's pretty old simple, like impact versus effort, right? But that does blend in to your point about risk or, versus, exposure versus the impact. So various factors, and I can change the model. It is based on where we are in the lens of the AI within the industry as well as within TIAA, and what might we do it safely, responsibly, while at the same time being able to have that business impact. This kind of is a 2x2. I'm not a gardener, I'm not creating magic quadrant, but this is Geeta quadrant that gives you the cluster of capabilities. And now we have opportunity to say which ones we are going after, and as we get mature, we can refresh, right? So that's one of the ways we are doing. And then blending in the whole governance we started with, right? Whether from architecture governance, whether from security, risk, compliance, ethics, all blended. But yeah, has the role of ensuring that you are not sending somebody into 20 different directions. Go and talk to. So our job is to also pull all this across the organization, embed in a one unified, coherent policy with different angles, different lenses, and guide the organization, right? So that's how we're making sure that, yes, we are not stifling innovation. And I like the notion of fast lane. I call it express lane. You can get on the express lane, but these are the guardrails. And when you move from the express lane to something else, here are the watch lights. And what are the stop lights that we have to make sure that not only we are letting you advance, but there are so many unknowns. So observability becomes extremely important. So not just architecture time, design time, but run time. Every areas we have basically observability to say when you get the green line to get out versus when you have stop light, and when you need to bring in a human in the loop, then human on the loop. And the last thing I would say also, as we are maturing, we have also defined our maturity index for the agents. So what are the types of agents, from assisted to augmented to kind of guided to autonomous, and same thing about the agent's maturity. So every day thing we are looking through that lens, but we are learning across the organization. And I would say, talkie, since this is about human, right, bringing your people along the right education is so important, because many a time the fear of, and why AI is not getting as much adoption yet, as we read through Harvard Business Review or anything, is because I think the fear of the unknown. So the training, how do you continuously educate, let people fail in a fail-safe environment, creating those, like, lab kind of an environment, that, hey, get used to it, get your access to the tool, so that you know what it means, rather than, okay, blocking. So that's the culture shift also. I think a lot of architecture back in the days used to be the, hand of the no. Over the years we have become yes and now continuously we are learning how do we get better with yes and, by democratizing and bringing everybody. And I think AI is the biggest technology we have right now to democratize and make it a equal playing field.
Yeah. No,
And to
100% agree. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
No, I
Daphne.
was just gonna, I love that so much. I was just gonna say, as we move into quantum computing, that's going to become even more relevant. It's
Yes,
it's going
Yeah.
to be so essential that we get that really correct.
Yeah,
So,
I think like quantum resets all the conversation
correct.
because we are
yes,
still like going into like the same linear. We are
Yes,
in an exponential evolution, definitely. But in my opinion, like when you move to quantum, it's like
you
a
get a
setup,
quantum leap.
and we start from like
yes.
a scratch because we need to redefine what we know about like what we have been designing as technology. But just in adding to what Geeta said, I love the words explainability and observability, because what I see happening today is basically we are trying to solve um, problems from the present with equations and solutions and a point of view from the past. And when we evolve as AI, in this AI era, we need to think like about the ethical things are also evolving in all that. And let's translate ethical risks and to what means like an enterprise architect role, jobs, and what we need to do in a daily basis. So ethical risks comes like if it's an opacity in the way that we are developing and conceptioning like systems that we cannot explain, monitor, and audit, that's a risk.
Yeah,
So we need to think about like how we are being transparent with the data lineage, what the version control model registers, how decision logs are every interference and shadow models, or how we can the risk on the right risks of AI things. And we are, I used to say that we are still like really on the beginning of the game, but we are like developing agents, but we are still not connecting because people does not understand that agents might be like substitute lines of process. We are just like using agents in isolated frame as we have silos in operations. We are developing like agents in silos. But when we get like more mature, we are being connect agents, and all this explainability and observability must be something in place because it helps us to govern better our process and the companies. So we need to shift conversations from compliance to consequences. It's not like what I need to do, but how I must change the process to make sure that we are pushing teams aside and of an equation that is the what we expect in terms of risk. So in practice, we launch fast, but we with no visibility doesn't make sense. We need to scale boldly. We need to make sure that we have like an extremely accountability experience to all. And just like to contribute for your codes, as you were saying before, I have one code that I used to tell like to have like a defense like how I position enterprise arc as a must have in all the projects is when more perspectives define we have to define the edges of the systems, the architecture becomes smarter, adaptable, and far more capable of serving the real world and solve real problems. Otherwise, it's just a piece of an slide that will like satisfies a compliance and not help us to solve problems.
I love it. I am so often telling the architects that reach out to me or I reach out to them like, who are your customers and how do you serve them? That can be internal, that can be external, and it's so important to remember that, you know, enterprise architecture at its core is a service-based industry in many different ways. All right. Well, we are at time. So if anybody has any, you know, closing remarks, feel free to jump in. But otherwise, I want to thank you all for your time today. Really great discussion. And if there's, you know, anyone in the chat who wants to continue this conversation, feel free to reach out to any of us directly. We're happy to do so.
Thank you. And don't be afraid. Just embrace and go ahead.
Absolutely. No fear. Hit the connect request button.
Yeah, I would say that diversity is not a checkbox. Ethics is not formality, and inclusion is not a side conversation. Just put all together to make sure that you have really impactful results, and no, make sure that the enterprise architects is jumping into all the discussions. Otherwise, it'll be like uh, designing and innovating. We might be more exposed to fail than ever.
Enterprise architects are human.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you all so much for your time today. And Philip, I'll turn it back over to you for the closing remarks, I believe. Awesome. Philip says, thanks for the wonderful discussion. There you are.
Perfect. Wonderful. Yes, my closing remarks will be starting right away in the next session. But thank you all for joining. Really, really interesting and super engaging sessions. So yeah, thank you all for your wonderful contributions. If you're all happy for us to do so, we'd love to get that up onto our YouTube channel and share it with our wider community after the event as well, because I think it was a really, really valuable discussion. So thank you all so much.
Thank you for having us, Philip.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
It
it
was
was such a
awesome.
privilege. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank you all.